Nora Vance stood in the dusty yard of the trading post at Dryfork and told the man in front of her to leave her alone, for his own good, before he got himself killed on her account. Nora Vance was 28 years old. Norah was on the run, and had been for months, and Norah had learned a hard lesson in those months, which was that everyone who helped her ended up hurt. So Norah had stopped letting people help her. Norah warned them off instead, pushing them away before her trouble could reach them. And so Norah warned the man who had just pulled her fallen supplies out of the dust and handed them back to her without a word. Norah looked at him and said, plain and hard, "I thank you for the help, but you had best not give me any more of it. I bring nothing but trouble. There is a man coming after me, a bad one, and everyone who has stood near me these last months has paid for it. 2 families that took me in got burned out. A man who spoke up for me got beaten near to death. So do yourself a kindness, mister, and forget you ever saw me. I am not worth what it will cost you." The man Norah was warning was named Dashee. Dashee was Chiricahua Apache, a horseman and a tracker, a man of about 32, who moved between the settlement at Dryfork, where he traded horses, and the high country to the south, where what remained of his people still held on in a hard time. Dashee had listened to Norah's warning all the way through, without interrupting, the way a man listens who is genuinely weighing what is said. And when Norah was done, Dashee did not step back, the way she meant him to. Dashee looked at Nora Vance steady and quiet, and Dashee said, "I live for trouble." He did not say it the way a young fool says it, all swagger and noise, looking for a fight to prove himself. Dashee said it low and even, the way a man states a plain fact about himself. And Nora Vance, who had expected the words to scare the man off, found instead that they stopped her cold, because there was something underneath them she had not expected, something that was not bravado at all, but was closer to the truth of a man who has already lost so much to trouble that he has stopped being able to be frightened by it. I want you to hold on to that answer, because it is the heart of this whole story, and its full meaning does not come clear until much later. I live for trouble. It sounds, at first, like a bold man's boast. It is not. By the end of this story, you will understand that when Dashee said those words to Nora Vance, he was telling her the truest and saddest and bravest thing about himself, all at once. But that comes later. First, you have to know what trouble had already done to each of them, before they ever met in that dusty yard, because 2 people who have both been broken by trouble recognize something in each other that whole people never see. So this is the story of a woman who warned everyone away to keep them safe, and a man who had survived more trouble than she could imagine and refused to be warned. It is the story of how her trouble came, the way she said it would, and how, for the first time in months, the person standing beside her when it came did not run and did not fall, but stood. Remember the warning. Remember the answer. Now let me tell you how they came to be said. Let me tell you first about Nora Vance and the trouble that followed her, because it was real, and it had a name, and the name was Cole Vance. Norah had married a good man named Daniel Vance 3 years before. Daniel had a younger brother, Cole, and Cole Vance was not a good man at all. Cole was hard and grasping and cruel, and Daniel had spent his life half managing and half apologizing for his brother. Daniel and Norah had a small place in the Sulphur Springs Valley, and Daniel, before he died, had filed a claim on a spring-fed parcel of land that turned out to have real water on it, which in that dry country was worth more than gold. Daniel left that claim, and the deed to it, to Norah, his wife, in a will drawn up proper and legal. Daniel Vance died in a fall from a horse. That is what was said, and it may even be true, though Norah had her doubts, because Cole Vance had wanted that spring land badly, and Daniel died at a convenient time for Cole, and Norah had seen the look on Cole's face at the funeral, and it was not grief. Whatever the truth of Daniel's death, this much was certain. The moment Daniel was in the ground, Cole Vance decided that the deed to that spring land and the widow who held it both belonged to him. Cole Vance first tried to make Norah sell him the land for almost nothing. Norah refused, because it was Daniel's last gift to her, and because she did not trust Cole with anything. Then Cole tried to make Norah marry him, which was legal enough in those days, and would have handed him the land through her, and Norah refused that too, with more force. And that was when Cole Vance turned to the thing he was best at, which was making people afraid. Cole began to pursue Norah, to hound her, to make it impossible for her to stay anywhere. And Cole made it known, in his cold way, that anyone who sheltered Nora Vance would answer to him. And people did answer to him. That was the terrible part. A family that took Norah in for a winter got their barn burned. A decent man who stood up to Cole on Norah's behalf got beaten so badly he never walked right again. Cole Vance was careful and cruel, and always kept himself just clear enough of the law, and the law in that territory in those days was thin and far away, and not much interested in a widow's troubles. So Norah ran. And Norah learned, the hardest way there is, that her trouble was catching, that it landed not on her, but on whoever was kind to her. And so Norah stopped letting anyone be kind. She warned them off. She pushed them away. She told herself it was the only decent thing left she could do, to make sure her troubles stopped with her. Remember the deed to the Springland. It is the thing Cole wanted, and it is the thing that ends this story, though not in the way Cole planned. Now let me tell you about Dashee, and the trouble that had already passed through his life, so you understand why a hunted widow's danger did not frighten him. Dashee was Chiricahua Apache, and he had been born in the Sulphur Springs Valley, in the country his people had lived in for longer than any settler's memory reached. Dashee had grown up in a large family, in a way of life that was whole and good. And Dashee had watched that whole good life come apart in his young manhood, in the years of upheaval and fighting and forced removals that fell so hard on his people in that era. Dashee had lost his father and his mother and a younger brother he had loved, to the sickness and the hunger and the violence of those years. He had survived what took nearly everyone he loved, and he had come out the other side of it, a quiet man who lived somewhat apart, between two worlds, trading horses at Dryfork and helping the settlers track lost stock, and riding south when he could to what remained of his band. I want to be careful how I tell you this, because it is easy to tell it wrong. Dashee was not a bitter man, and he was not a broken one, though he had every reason to be both. He was rarer than that. He had passed through the worst trouble the world can hand a person, the loss of nearly everyone and everything, and come out the far side with a deep, quiet steadiness that only that passage can teach. Dashee knew exactly how much a person can lose and still keep breathing, and a man who knows that is very hard to frighten. When Norah warned him a bad man was coming, Dashee heard the danger. But he had walked through fire already, and one cruel man with a grudge did not weigh against what Dashee had survived, the way Norah imagined it would. So when Dashee said, "I live for trouble," he was not boasting that he loved a fight. He was telling Norah, though she did not understand it yet, that trouble was the water he had learned to breathe, that he had lost his reasons to live once, and had spent years since with none, and that here, suddenly, was a person in real danger who needed someone unafraid to stand beside her, and that being needed like that, being of use in exactly the way his hard survival had made him fit for, was the closest thing to a reason to live that Dashee had felt in a long, long time. But all of that was still underneath the two plain words, that first day in the yard. Norah heard only the words. The meaning would take time. Nora Vance did everything she could to make Dashee keep his distance, and Dashee, in his quiet way, simply declined. Norah meant to leave Dryfork within the day, the way she left everywhere, before her trouble could catch up and land on someone. But her horse had gone lame on the hard trail in, badly enough that riding it out would have crippled it, and Norah had almost no money left to buy another, and so Norah was stuck at Dryfork for a few days at least, which frightened her, because staying still was how Cole found people. It was Dashee who solved the horse. Dashee traded horses, and Dashee had among his string a good gray gelding, sound and calm and well-trained, a horse Dashee had raised and gentled himself. And Dashee offered the gray to Norah for what little she had, far less than the horse was worth, and when Norah, proud and suspicious, said she would not take charity and could not pay the animal's true price. Dashee said the price was fair to him, and that a horse standing idle in his string was worth less than a horse carrying someone who needed carrying. Remember the grey horse. Dashee raised that horse and gentled it with his own hands, and it carries Norah through the worst of what is coming. Norah took the grey because she had to, and she meant to ride out the next morning. But the next morning, a hard rain had washed out the southern trail. The only way that led clear of the country Cole was known to be working, and Norah was stuck another day. And in that day, and the next, and the several after that, as one thing and another kept her at Dryfork, Nora Vance and Dashee fell into talking, the way people do, and Norah found, to her own alarm, that she did not want to warn this man off nearly as much as she knew she should. Because Dashee was easy to be near. He did not crowd Norah, and he did not press her. He was quiet, but it was a full quiet, not an empty one, and when he did speak, what he said was worth the wait. Dashee asked Norah nothing about her trouble that she did not offer first. He simply let her be a person, in a way no one had let her be a person in months, because everyone else either wanted something from Norah or was frightened of what following her might cost. Dashee wanted nothing and feared nothing, and in the space that made, Nora Vance began, without meaning to unclench. Norah told Dashee about Cole over those days. Not all at once, but in pieces, the way you tell a hard thing to someone who does not flinch. She told him about Daniel, and the fall from the horse she was not sure was an accident. She told him about the springland and the deed, and how Cole wanted both the land and her. She told him about the burned barn and the beaten man, and how she had learned to warn people off, and how much she hated that she had to. And Dashee listened to all of it, and did not flinch, and did not offer any of the useless things people offer. And at the end he said only, "This Cole, he is a man who hurts people who cannot fight back. Families, a man who spoke words. He has not yet stood in front of someone who is not afraid of him. Men like that come apart when they finally do. I have seen it." And Norah, who had spent months with the weight of Cole crushing down on her, felt something shift at those quiet words. Because Dashee did not say Cole was not dangerous. Dashee took the danger seriously. But Dashee also saw something about Cole that Norah, in her fear, had lost sight of, which was that Cole's whole power came from the fear he made. And that fear is a thing that only works on the frightened. Norah had been frightened for so long, she had forgotten there was any other way to be. Dashee was reminding her. There was an evening, several days in, that changed the shape of things between them. Norah had asked Dashee, carefully, about himself, about why a man like him lived so apart, between the settlement and the South Country, belonging fully to neither. And Dashee, who had listened to Norah's hard story without flinching, gave her his own in return, because that is how trust is built. One hard truth traded for another. Dashee told Norah about his family, and the years his people had been broken and scattered and hunted, and the father and mother and younger brother he had lost. He did not tell it for pity, and he did not dress it up. He told it plain, the way it had happened, and Nora Vance listened to a man describe losing nearly everyone he had ever loved, and understood, at last, what had been underneath his answer in the yard that first day. "That is why you said you live for trouble," Norah said softly. "Not because you are not afraid, because you have already lost everything a man can lose, and lived. So my trouble does not frighten you the way it frightens other people." And Dashee looked at her and said, "It is more than that. When you have lost your reasons, and you go on living anyway, you spend a long time with no purpose in it. And then one day trouble comes that you are fit to stand in, for someone who needs you. And standing in it, for them, becomes the reason. I have had no reason for a long time, Nora Vance. Do not ask me to run from the first one I have found." Nora Vance did not have an answer for that, because Dashee had just turned her whole warning inside out. Norah had been telling everyone, for months, "Stay away, my trouble will cost you." And here was a man telling her, quietly, that standing in her trouble was not a cost to him, but a gift, the first purpose he had felt since his world came apart. Norah had never once considered that her trouble, the thing she had learned to see as a curse she carried to others, could be the very thing that gave a hollowed-out man something to live for. It changed how she saw her own danger, and it changed, though she was not ready to admit it yet, how she saw Dashee. The trouble came, the way Norah had always said it would. Cole Vance found her at Dryfork. It was bound to happen. Norah had been in one place too long, and Cole had his ways of hearing where she surfaced. And one hot afternoon, Cole Vance rode into Dryfork with 2 hired men, hard cases he paid to do the things he did not care to do himself. And Cole made straight for the trading post, because word had reached him that the Vance widow was there. Norah saw them coming. Norah's first instinct, the instinct months of running had beaten into her, was to flee, to get on the grey and ride and lead the trouble away before it landed on anyone at Dryfork. And Norah nearly did. But this time, for the first time in months, Norah was not alone, and the difference that made was the whole difference. Because Dashee had seen the 3 riders come in too, and Dashee had read them in a glance, the way a tracker reads everything, and Dashee was already moving. And here is where I want to be careful to tell you what kind of man Dashee was, because it matters. Dashee did not meet Cole's men with a gun and a killing. Dashee was not that kind of man, and this is not that kind of story. What Dashee had, that Cole did not expect and could not fight, was that Dashee knew that country better than any man alive, and Dashee was not afraid. And Dashee had spent the last several days quietly making sure that if Cole came, Cole would not find the frightened, isolated widow he was counting on. Dashee had done a thing, in those days, that Norah only fully understood later. Dashee had gone to the people of Dryfork, quietly, the settlers and the traders, and Dashee had told them the truth about Cole Vance, about the burned barns and the beaten man, about how Cole's whole power was that he caught people alone and afraid. And Dashee had asked them a simple thing, the way Ellen Shaw once asked a whole valley, though these two never met and never could have. He asked them not to be alone and not to be afraid when Cole came. Dashee had also, being a careful man, sent word south and word to the one territorial marshal in 3 days' ride, who was known to be honest, with an account of everything Norah had told him about Daniel's convenient death and Cole's threats, written down and witnessed. So when Cole Vance rode into Dryfork expecting to corner a lone, terrified widow, Cole found instead that the widow was standing in the middle of the trading post yard, and beside her stood Dashee, calm as still water, and around them, not crowding but present, stood a dozen people of Dryfork who had decided, because a quiet Apache horseman had asked them to, that they were done letting Cole Vance make them afraid. Cole Vance was not used to this. Cole's power had always run on isolation and fear, on catching people alone. Cole looked at the widow who was not alone, and the crowd that was not afraid, and the quiet, dangerous stillness of the man beside her. And Cole did what men like Cole do when their usual tools stop working. Cole got loud, and Cole got ugly. And that was Cole's mistake, because Cole made all those threats out loud, in front of a dozen witnesses, and one of those witnesses, unknown to Cole, was a deputy the honest marshal had sent ahead in answer to Dashee's message, a plain-dressed man in the crowd who was writing every word of it down. Cole Vance stood in that yard and, in his rage at being defied, spoke aloud the threats and half-confessions that months of careful cruelty had kept hidden. And he did it in front of the law he had always managed to stay clear of, because Dashee had arranged, quietly, for the law to be there to hear it. There was a bad moment, I will not pretend there was not. One of Cole's hired men went for his gun, and for an instant the whole yard tipped toward blood. But Dashee had positioned himself, in that careful way of his, exactly where he needed to be, and Dashee took the man's arm before the gun cleared leather, and held it, and said something low that only that man heard, and the man looked into Dashee's steady, unfrightened face and thought better of dying for Cole Vance's grudge, and let the gun go. It was over in a breath. No one was shot. Dashee had faced down the trouble not with more violence, but with the one thing Cole and his men had never counted on, which was a man they could not frighten and could not surprise, backed by people who had stopped being afraid. The deputy stepped forward then and put Cole Vance and his 2 men under arrest, on the strength of the threats Cole had just made in front of a dozen witnesses, and the sworn account Dashee had sent ahead, and the questions about Daniel's death that a real investigation, once it finally started, would go on to answer. Cole Vance, who had ruled by fear for years, was led out of Dryfork in irons, undone not by a faster gun, but by a widow who finally stopped running, and a man who finally gave her somewhere to stand. Nora Vance watched Cole go, and felt months of crushing weight lift off her all at once, and turned to find Dashee standing quietly beside her, the way he had been standing beside her, she realized, since the moment she first told him to go away. With Cole Vance in irons and the law finally moving, Nora Vance was free, for the first time in months, to stop running, and Norah found, standing in the quiet after the storm, that she did not know how. Running and warning people off had become the whole of who she was. She had forgotten how to let someone stay. It was Dashee who helped her remember, and he did it the way he did everything, quietly, without pushing. That evening, when the dust had settled and Dryfork was letting out the breath it had held, Dashee found Norah sitting alone, turning Daniel's deed over in her hands, the Springland deed that had been the cause of all of it. And Norah said, without looking up, "You could have been killed today, all of you, because of me, because of this piece of paper and a bad man who wanted it. This is what I mean when I say I bring nothing but trouble. Everywhere I go, I bring this." And Dashee sat down beside her, and Dashee said the thing that finally reached her. "Nora Vance, listen to me, because I am going to say something you have needed to hear for a long time. You did not bring this trouble. Cole Vance brought this trouble. You have spent months taking the blame for a cruel man's choices, telling yourself that his evil was your curse to carry, warning good people away as if the danger came from you instead of from him. It never came from you. You are not the trouble. You are the one the trouble was aimed at. There is a difference, and you have lost sight of it, and I will not let you go on not seeing it." Nora Vance sat very still, because no one had ever said that to her, and it was as if a weight she had carried so long she thought it was part of her body had suddenly been named as something she could set down. "For months," Norah said slowly, "I have been so sure I was poison, that anyone who cared for me would pay for it. So I stopped letting anyone care." And Dashee said, "I know. I watched you try to do it to me, that first day, in the yard. You told me to forget I ever saw you. And I could not, and I would not, because I saw, even then, that you had mistaken the thing that was hunting you for something that was wrong with you. They are not the same, Norah. A woman who is hunted is not the same as a woman who is dangerous. You are the first. You have been calling yourself the second for so long you believe it." And then Dashee told Norah the fuller meaning of the words he had said that first day, the words she had held on to without understanding. "When I told you I live for trouble," Dashee said, "I did not mean I go looking for fights. I meant that I lost everything once, my family, my people's whole way of living, all of it, and I came out the other side alive but empty, a man with no reason left in him. For years I had none. And then a hunted woman rode into Dryfork and told me to stay away from her trouble, and standing in that trouble beside her, being of use to her, gave me back the first reason I have had to be alive since I lost my own. So do not tell me your trouble cost me something, Norah. Your trouble gave me back my life. I would not trade these last weeks, danger and all, for 100 safe, empty years alone." Nora Vance looked at Dashee, this steady, quiet man who had walked through more loss than she could fathom, and come out the far side able to say a thing like that. And Norah felt the last of her running drain out of her. Dashee was not asking her to be safe. He was telling her he had chosen her trouble, and found in the standing the very reason to live his losses had taken from him. That was a man she could finally, after months of pushing everyone off, let stay. "I do not know how to stop warning people off," Norah said honestly. "It is all I have done for so long." And Dashee said, "Then start with one. Stop warning me. That is all. Just one man, one time. Let me stay." And Nora Vance, who had spent months making sure her trouble stopped with her, who had pushed away every hand that reached for her, looked at Dashee and did the hardest and bravest thing she had done in all that hard, brave year. She stopped warning him off. She let him stay. "All right," Norah said, and her voice shook. "Stay. God help you, stay." And Dashee smiled, which he did not do often, and said, "There is no trouble in that. That is the one thing in all of this that was never any trouble at all." Cole Vance was tried and convicted in the end on the strength of his own loud threats and the questions that a real investigation finally asked about Daniel's death. And Cole went to the territorial prison, and the long shadow he had cast over Nora Vance's life lifted for good. Norah kept the Springland, Daniel's last gift to her, the deed that had been the cause of so much grief and turned out, in the end, to be the foundation of something good. Because Nora Vance and Dashee built their life on that Springland, the parcel with the real water in that dry country. It was good land, and between Norah's stubbornness and Dashee's deep knowledge of that country and its horses, the two of them made it into a fine horse ranch, raising and gentling animals, the way Dashee had gentled the gray gelding that carried Norah through the worst of it. Remember the gray horse that Dashee raised and traded to a hunted woman for less than it was worth? That horse lived a long, good life on the Springland and grew old in a green pasture, and Norah never once rode a different horse if the gray was sound, because the gray had been the first thing Dashee ever gave her, back when she was still trying to send him away. It was not an easy country to be what they were, a Chiricahua man and a settler widow in the Arizona territory of those years. I will not pretend it was. There were people who would not trade with them, and hard words, and doors that stayed closed. But there were also, over time, more people who came to know Dashee for the man he was, steady and honorable and unafraid, the man who had stood in the trading post yard and faced down Cole Vance without firing a shot. And the people of Dryfork, who had stood with them that day, stayed their friends and neighbors for the rest of their lives, because you do not stand together against a thing like Cole Vance and then go back to being strangers. Nora Vance never forgot how to recognize trouble, but she did, over the years, unlearn the thing that had nearly cost her everything, which was the belief that she was the trouble, that she was poison, that loving her was a danger she had no right to let anyone accept. Dashee cured her of that, patiently, over a long, good life, simply by staying, day after day, and never once being sorry he had, and never once letting the trouble that sometimes came make him wish he had listened to her warning and ridden away. And sometimes, in the evenings, on the porch of the house they built on the Springland, Norah would remember the first thing she ever said to Dashee, in the dusty yard at Dryfork. "I bring nothing but trouble." And she would remember what he answered, quiet and even, the words she had not understood until much later. "I live for trouble." And Nora Vance would reach over and take the hand of the man who had refused to be warned, the man whose losses had made him unafraid of hers. And she would understand, all over again, that the truest love is not the kind that runs from your trouble. It is the kind that hears the warning and stays anyway, and turns your trouble into the very thing you build a life on.